So after following the recap video from session number 5, you should have your spaceship animated like so. Enters frame, holds position, and then exits frame. This here becomes the basis of your spaceship animated loop. As you can see, it's endlessly looping, entering frame, and then exiting. Now that we have this basic animation in place, it's time to build out the terrain and animate the terrain. The terrain would move in the opposite direction of the spaceship to give a sense that the spaceship is moving forward. That means we need a terrain that is long along the y-axis so that we can move the terrain along the y-axis. So let's go ahead and build it out. The first thing I'm going to do is increase my work area panel and reduce the size of my camera panel. Remember, I always like to have my camera view set up here in a panel so I can see what's happening through my camera. And here is my work area panel where I can move around, orbit, and do all of that. The first thing I want to do is I want to box select my spaceship and select every part of the spaceship. Now, if you're unable to draw this box, all you have to do is hit T on your keyboard, which brings up the toolbar, and then here is your selection tool. If you long click on the tool, it gives you options for 4 different tools. You might have some other tools selected. What you need to have selected is select box, and this is the box selection tool. When I click on that, you can see now you can click and draw a box. Now the box selection is really easy to use, and that's why I prefer to use the box selection tool when selecting multiple objects. This way you can select all the pieces of your spaceship. And now the reason I'm doing that is I want to hide all of these pieces, and the simple way to do that is just hit H on your keyboard and it hides everything. Now you might be wondering, how do you bring it all back? It's super easy. All you have to do is hit Alt H on your keyboard and everything that's hidden in your file will be revealed. All right, so I'm going to hit H again to hide this, and now we have the space to create our terrain. Of course, the basic shape that we are going to use to create the terrain is a plane. So I'm going to hit Shift A on the keyboard, get into the mesh menu and click on plane. Now you can see the plane is this flat object that does not have any Z value, no thickness, but it has a X and Y. So let's quickly take a look at the item values. So I'm going to hit N on the keyboard and click on the object here. And here we have its values. So you can see the X, Y, Z for location and rotation are 0. The scale is 111 and the dimensions are 2 meters by 2 meters and 0 for the Z because there is no thickness. All right. So from this we can say that this square is 2 meters by 2 meters. All right. Now this will be important in a bit, and that's why I wanted to bring your attention to this. All right. Now for the purpose of our animated loop, we need to increase the size of our plane, because if we quickly take a look at our camera, you can see that our plane is really tiny as compared to our camera position, and therefore we need to increase the size of this. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to hit S on my keyboard and I'm going to put in a value of 40. So I'm increasing the size of my plane by 40 times. Now let's take a look at our item values. So if you look at item, here you can see what was 1 before is now 40, and what was 2 meters by 2 meters is now 80 meters by 80 meters. What this tells me is that the scale is a multiplier, because when we increased by 40, we multiplied 1 by 40. And here we had 2, so 40 into 2 is 80. So right now, I can say that each side of my square is 80 meters. Now a quick question for you, which is going to be really important. If the sides of this square are exactly 80 meters by 80 meters, then what is the distance from the center of the square to one of the edges? Take a moment to think about it. If the edges are 80 by 80, then what is the distance from the center to the edge? If you said 40, then you are absolutely right, because the center of this square lies exactly halfway between the two edges. And if the distance between these two edges is 80, then halfway would be 80 divided by 2, which is 40. Perfect. So now it's time to begin to build our terrain. So I'm going to click on the plane and jump into the edit mode. Now, as soon as we are in the edit mode, you can see that we only have one face. And if I go into the vertex select mode, you can see we have only 4 vertices. This isn't enough geometry to create a terrain. What we need is more geometry. And by geometry, I mean we need to have many more faces, edges, and vertices to be able to modify them in a way that looks like a natural terrain. So the easy way to do that is hit A on the keyboard to select everything, of course in edit mode, and then right click, and that brings up this menu where we can go ahead and click on subdivide. Now as soon as I click on subdivide, notice what happens. I clicked on subdivide and you can see 2 edges have appeared here, dividing each of the edges. So this edge has been divided and this edge has been divided, and both of these vertices have been joined by an edge, and again this side edge has been divided and this edge has been divided, and both of these vertices have been connected with an edge. And this way, by subdividing, we have created 4 different faces. And also, as soon as you activate subdivide, and if you don't click away, a menu appears here, and this is the subdivide menu. And down here you can see a couple of options. We're going to take a look only at number of cuts at the moment. So if you look at this, it says number of cuts is 1. That means we have subdivided once. That means each edge has been divided once, having one vertex in the middle. Now if I increase that, notice what happens. I increase it to 2. Now you'll notice each edge has been divided twice. So you can see 2 vertices on each edge, and of course all of those vertices have been connected across. Now if I increase this to 3, each edge is now divided with 3 vertices, and so on so forth. And as you notice, as you increase the number, the size of our faces decreases and the number of faces increases. Now, if you were to click on this button here, the arrow button, there is a limit which is 10. But if you were to click on this number and put in a number like 50, you could do that. And there you go. You can see we have so many tiny little faces. Now, you want to be careful with this number. I can bump it up to a maximum of, say, I'm punching in 150. But notice when I hit enter, it kind of defaults back to 100. And so 100 is the limit of the number of cuts you can apply at one time. But you want to be careful about this, because the more cuts you apply, that means you're subdividing your face into many more small faces, and this can impact how fast your computer works. And you might notice if you increase the cuts to 100, your computer becomes a little sluggish. You won't be able to orbit or move around, and that's why we always want to keep this number at a minimum. So right now, to create our terrain, I think I'm going to go with a number of 20 instead of 100. All right, so this looks all right, and I'm going to click away, and this confirms the number of cuts. And notice this menu has disappeared, and now we have confirmed the number of cuts. And as you can see now, if I jump into our face select mode, we have so many different faces. All right, now at the moment, I don't want to see this panel, nor do I need to work with the timeline, nor do I need any of these panels. But what's important to me right now is my work area. So a quick little tip to maximize this panel while I'm working is to have my mouse in the viewport and just hit Control Spacebar, and that maximizes the working panel. And this works with any panel, so I'm going to hit Control Spacebar to go back. And if I go ahead to my outliner, put my mouse over the outliner and hit Control Space, you can see now the outliner has been maximized. I can go back by hitting Control Space once again, and you can do that with the timeline. And basically this works with any panel. And so I really like to use this to maximize the workspace, and right now I've maximized my viewport. Now that we've added enough geometry to our plane using Subdivide, it's time to go ahead and deform our plane to make it look more like a natural landscape or terrain. So here I am in edit mode with the face select activated, and I'm going to click on any face here, and I want to move this face up along the Z axis. So what I'm going to do is hit G on the keyboard followed by Z, and I'm going to move my mouse, and here you can see the face is rising up above the plane, creating this kind of mountain. And so you can do that across the plane in different places. So here I've selected this GZ, and I can do that. Now I can also select multiple faces. So I'm going to draw a box. This is box select, and it selects these random faces. And I'm going to hit G followed by Z on the keyboard. And there you go. I've pulled out this kind of a plateau. And so I can go around the whole plane and begin to pull out faces. Now, above on this plateau itself, I can select a couple of faces, and I can raise that as well. And I can go ahead here, and I can also hold down shift and select different patches of uh, of faces and move them with G followed by Z. And there you go. You can see I've increased that. Now there's another type of selection tool that you can use to select faces. Right now we are in the box select mode. So to change it, I'm going to hit T on my keyboard to bring up the toolbar. And here is the select box. If I long click on this tool, it gives me a couple of options. And right now we were on select box. I can go ahead and select circle. And this gives me this kind of a circular cursor. And I can then click and drag. And if I want to reduce the size of the cursor or the selection, I can come up here and reduce the radius. And there you go. Now you can see that the cursor is a lot smaller. And this allows me to kind of select random, faces. And I'm going to hit G on the keyboard followed by Z and bring this whole thing up. And I'm also going to select these faces here, GZ. And also these planes so I want to bring in some kind of variation. And this is where you can get creative. You can do your own version of your terrain. All right. So now that we have our terrain kind of built, I want to look at it through my camera. So I'm going to hit Control Space to minimize. And here on the left, I can see my camera. So you can see that, not much is visible. So I'm going to bring up my spaceship by hitting Alt-H on the keyboard to unhide our spaceship. And the spaceship is here, but we can't see it. And that's because if I zoom in, you can see we have kind of raised our terrain above our spaceship. So what I'm going to do is I am going to select the plane here on the left, and I'm going to move it on the Z axis down. So G followed by Z, and move it down. And here you can see on the left side, our spaceship is now revealed. There you go. So it's always important to, when you're building here on the left side, on the right side, it's always important to periodically check what you're creating through the camera. And that's what I did exactly right now. And I saw that my spaceship wasn't visible. And now that it's visible, this looks like a good kind of position. All right. Now, before we move ahead, let's go and analyze the animation that we want to create. So here we are in the blend file for the spaceship animation loop. I'm going to hit spacebar on my keyboard to play the animation, and let's take a look. So you can see the spaceship enters from right of frame, it flips, and then exits from left of frame. And the terrain is traveling from left to right. Let's quickly jump out of the camera view to take a look at our scene setup. So I'm going to click on that button, and here you go. Here you can see this is our scene setup. So let me just zoom in a bit so we can identify which part of the scene is. I'm also going to jump back to my first frame by clicking on this and hitting 1. So this here is our first frame, and this here is our camera. And if I were to play the animation, you can see our spaceship enters the field of view of the camera, does its flip, and then exits. And then the loop begins again. Now that you have a general sense of how the scene is set up, let's begin to build this out. Now here we are back to the terrain that we created. Now before we go ahead and extend this terrain along the y-axis, let's just add some color and maybe a light so that we can have our rendered view visible in our left camera panel. Alright, so I'm going to click on our plane and scroll down to our material tab in the properties panel, and I'm going to click on new, which creates a new material, and I'm going to click on the base color, which brings up the color wheel, and now I can select a color. I think I'm going to go with something like a reddish brown, so that it looks like maybe we are on Mars. All right. Okay, so here we have this kind of a color, and now I'm going to jump into the rendered view by hitting Z, and this brings up our viewing modes. So I'm going to click on rendered. And now we have the rendered view, but of course nothing is visible. That's because we don't have a light in our scene. As you can see in our outliner, we only have a camera, a plane, and our spaceship. So I'm going to go ahead and add a light. Shift A, add menu, and here let's scroll down to light, and in the light menu let's go ahead and add a sun. Now as soon as we added the sun, you can see that we have lit our scene. It is a bit dim, but you can see that we have a shadow right underneath our spaceship. That means our sun is positioned right above our spaceship. So it's time to rotate this sun and get a nice angle. But before that, I want to increase the brightness of our sun. So with the sun selected in the outliner, I'm going to go to the properties panel and click on the data tab, which has an icon of a light bulb. Now here we have access to all the light properties, and the first thing I want to do is increase the strength. I'm going to click on this and hit the number 5. And there you go, we have a much brighter scene here, as you can see. Now another thing I like to do is I like to increase the angle, because if you see the shadow here, it's very sharp, and I like to have a nice soft shadow. So I'm going to increase that value, and as I increase the value, you can see that our shadow is now a lot softer. Alright, now the only one thing I want to change is I want to change the angle of the sun. Right now it's right above the spaceship, and it doesn't look very nice. So I'm going to bring up the item menu, alright, by hitting N on the keyboard, and with the sun selected, it's time to move around the rotation values to get a kind of angle that I like. There you go. I think I like something like this. So we have a trailing shadow. The shadow is trailing behind. All right, and maybe we could bump up the brightness a bit. Let's see what 7 does. 7 is also pretty good. Maybe we could bump it up to 10. And there you go. So we have bumped it up to 10. Perfect. So now we have our terrain, our spaceship, and a light. And if I were to play this animation, you can see we have our primary keyframes where our spaceship enters the frame, holds position, and then exits the frame. Now it's time to extend our terrain along the y-axis and animate the terrain. At the moment, we don't need the camera view, so I'm going to collapse this panel by bringing my mouse up here and turning it into the plus sign, clicking and dragging over, and that way I collapse the panel, and now I just have one viewport. To extend the terrain along the y-axis, I could select the plane and hit Shift D to duplicate, and then move it along the y-axis by hitting G followed by Y and move it here. And I could do that again, Shift D, G, Y, and so on and so forth. Shift D, G, Y. This is one way of doing it, but it isn't ideal. If you look closely, you can see there is a gap between the planes. This is because we have manually done it by hand. And you can see a gap here, and that gap is a little more here. And so this way, if we were to duplicate and move it along the y-axis, it isn't an accurate way to do it. In addition, you'll notice that as many duplicates you've made of the plane, they appear in your outliner. That means we have added many more planes to our scene. What this essentially does is it increases the number of objects in your Blender file, and eventually your Blender file can get too heavy to work with. And so this isn't an ideal way of working where you're duplicating the same object and placing them several times. So let's look at another way of doing this. I'm going to quickly go ahead and select these extra planes by shift selecting and hit X on the keyboard and deleting them all. Now to extend the plane, we are going to use a modifier. So I'm going to click on the plane. With the plane selected, I'm going to head over to the properties panel and click on the modifiers tab. And here, as you can see, there are no modifiers applied. I'm going to click on add modifier, and inside the generate menu, if we scroll all the way up, you can see we have the array modifier. Now let's go ahead and click on that. As soon as I clicked on the array modifier, you can see we have the array modifier applied to our object in the modifier tab, And out here in the viewport, you can see we have some duplicates of our plane or terrain. Now, let me bring your attention to the array modifier. So here the array modifier has a couple of options. The first option is shape. Under shape we have line. If you were to click on this drop down, you have a couple of options here: circle, curve and transform. At the moment I'll just demonstrate circle, see what happens. If I click on circle, you can see now the duplicates have been placed around a circle and the options down here have changed. Right now we don't need the circle option, so I'm going to go ahead and click on line, and this is what we need. However, we want to extend our plane along the y-axis and not the x-axis. To do this, I need to bring your attention to these values here: offset x, y and z. If you notice, the x value is 1 and the other values y, z are 0, 0. If I were to zero out the x value, you would say that all the copies have now disappeared, but that isn't the case. Right now 0, 0, 0 means world origin 0, and that means all three copies are stacked in the same place. If I go ahead and put a value of 1 for y, now the duplicates are placed along the y-axis. I can increase the count by clicking on this button here, and you can see we can add as many copies as we want. And doing this does not add objects to your outliner. Let me zoom out a bit, and you can see we can add as many. We could even add 100, and still your file would not get sluggish or slow. So right now I want to bump this up only to say 7. So we have 7 copies. Alright, so now we've extended our terrain along the y-axis. Let's quickly jump into the camera view by clicking on the camera toggle view. Now here we are in our camera view. The reason I jumped back into the camera view is I wanted to demonstrate the direction in which our terrain should be moving. So I'm going to select my plane here in the outliner and hit N on the keyboard in the viewport to bring up the item menu. And now let's go ahead and tweak our y value, because we know that we want to move our terrain along the y-axis. So if I were to click on this and drag it this way, you'll notice that our values are turning negative or minus. You can see the values are minus. And when I move this, it seems as if our spaceship is traveling backwards. So definitely this is not the direction we want to move our terrain in. Let me just zero out this value once again. So the direction we want to move in is the positive direction. So I'm going to click and drag it to the right, and there you go. So this looks correct. So if I do this, this is what we want. However, soon you'll notice that you've run out of terrain. Now the reason for running out of terrain can be seen in the top view. So let me first zero out this value. There you go. And I'm going to hit 7 on my numpad to jump into top view. Alright, so here we are. And let me zoom in on our spaceship. So here we are, you can see our spaceship is here, and this is the world origin because our cursor is at the world origin, the 3D cursor. And I'm going to zoom out. So here you can see that our terrain begins here and extends upwards. And so if I were to click on Y and drag it in the negative direction, you can see that this is the direction that we don't want it to travel because it's going into the negative direction. The direction we want to go in is the positive direction. And so as we move it in the positive direction, you can see very soon we have run out of terrain. Can you see that? We've run out of terrain. So the way to fix this is that we want the duplicates of our terrain to appear on this side instead of up here. So the easy way to do that is to just go ahead to our modifier panel and change the y value from 1 to -1. Boom. And there you go. Now we have our duplicates on the other side. So if I jump back into our camera view and now click on the y value and move it, this is what we want. And we're not running out of terrain. And now it's time to animate our terrain. But before that, let's quickly hop over to our animated reference file so that we can understand how to create a loop. So here we are in the animation reference file, and I'm going to play the animation just to take a look. So our spaceship enters, flips, and then exits. And notice how the background doesn't jump. It seems like a seamless infinite loop. Let me hide the spaceship so that we can only focus on the background. So I've selected my spaceship layers and I'm going to hit H on the keyboard to hide them. Now notice the background. Although our timeline is looping, you do not see any jump in the animation. It seems like an infinite loop. Now the reason for this is that for an animated loop to seem seamless, the first keyframe and the last keyframe need to be identical. So here we are on first frame, and you can see, just to make this a lot clearer, I'm going to mark our terrain. So we have this kind of an edge here. You can see that. All right. And as we move forward, you can see that the marking remains in place. And as I go all the way to my last frame, which is 150, exactly at 150, you'll notice that the terrain aligns with our marking, which means my first frame and my last frame are exactly identical. And this allows for an infinite loop that doesn't jump at all. Perfect. Let's take a look from outside the camera. So here we are outside the camera, and let's play the animation from frame number 1. So it starts here, the animation goes, travels, 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 and then you can see it jumps back. And it does so seamlessly. Although you can see the jump here, but inside the camera, you notice no jump because the frames are absolutely matched. So here we are back in our animation file, and now it's time to animate our terrain loop. So the first thing we need to do is add our first keyframe. So I'm going to jump back to our first frame by hitting 1 on the keyboard, and we've jumped back to our first frame. And I'm going to bring my mouse, of course with the plane selected, I'm going to bring my mouse to hover over the location values, and I'm going to hit I on the keyboard. Alright, so now we have entered our first keyframe. Now from our understanding of our loop, we need to have a last keyframe here at 150, and this needs to match with our first keyframe. So right now I'm just going to move this, and I'm going to keep scrolling, 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 scrolling until I run out of terrain. And I'm going to go ahead and add a keyframe here. Now let's play this animation and see what happens. So you can see the animation isn't exactly what we want. You can see that there is a jump and it doesn't look like a seamless loop. Now there are two things at play here. Let me turn off the spaceship for you to notice that. So I'm just going to go ahead and untwirl this and shift select all of this and hit H on the keyboard so we don't have the spaceship. I'm going to jump back to frame number 1, and now let's look at the animation more closely. So you can see that the terrain starts slow, then speeds up, and then slows down at the end. You see that? It slows down, it starts slow, picks up speed, goes really fast, then slows down again. Now this in animation is referred to as easing in and easing out. And by default, Blender, when it animates between two keyframes, it adds an ease in and ease out. However, for this kind of animation, we don't need an ease in and ease out. So to get rid of this, all we have to do is draw a box or box select our keyframes, both keyframes, the first and the last, and with your mouse over the timeline, hit T on the keyboard, which brings up the set key interpolation menu. And there are a whole bunch of options here. What we need right now is the linear option. So click on linear, and now this animation will be a little different. So let's play it and see. So now you can see that the terrain is actually traveling at a consistent speed. However, when the loop starts again, you can see there's a jump. You see that? Let's notice it again. There you go, there's a jump there. And the reason it's jumping is because, as we know, that the first and last frames need to match. Here you can see frame number 1 is this. However, frame number 150 isn't matched. This is some other position. So how do we match this? I'm going to show you a very easy way right now. So this is frame number 1, and I'm going to use this tool here. This is called the annotate tool. With this annotate tool, we can draw lines in our viewport. So I'm going to click on this, And I'm going to use this annotate tool to mark some of these edges. So we have that edge, that edge. I'm going to mark this edge. And right now I'm drawing these lines with my mouse, so you can too. There you go. And I'm drawing quite a few lines, so I have enough points to match. All right. And it's a good idea to match corners. Okay, so now as I scroll through the animation, you can see that our annotate lines remain in the same position. So all we have to do now is find a position that matches that. So I'm scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. And now something familiar can be seen here. You can see this and this kind of a shape that's familiar. So I'm going to bring it back all the way to this 150, and I'm going to change this value and scroll back to find that position. And I think we have found it. There you go. Here you can see that our annotate lines are matching absolutely perfectly. And here you can see our number is 480. So now I'm just going to go ahead and hit I on the keyboard. So now we have a new keyframe. And I'm going to go ahead and click on this to delete my annotate lines. So I'm going to cross that, and there you go. And now let's play our animation. And now you'll see that our terrain is infinitely looping without any of that jerky or jumping. Perfect. Now I'm going to turn on our spaceship with Alt-H, and here we have our spaceship. Perfect. The looping terrain is working perfectly. Now that we have our terrain animation looping perfectly, it's time to add some interesting animation to our spaceship. So here we have our spaceship, and it enters frame, holds position, and then exits frame. So I'm going to click on the spaceship to reveal its keyframes. And so here we can see that it enters our frame up till the 30th frame, holds position till 120, and then begins to exit. So what we need to do is add some interesting animation between 30 and 120. So let's plan this out. I think I want the spaceship to enter, and after this I wanted to swerve to this side a bit along the x-axis. So say by 60 it swerves to this side, and then it swerves back a little onto that side by 90, and then it comes back to position at 120 before exiting the frame. Let's see how this looks. But before this, I want to bring your attention to a new function that we are going to use. Instead of always coming up here and hitting I on the keyboard, this time we're going to use a function called auto keying. And here is the button for auto keying. You can see with hovering your mouse, it brings up the name auto keying. Now, what is auto keying? If I click on this, and if I were to, place my scroll bar anywhere on the timeline, I want it to be at 60, let's say. And if I were to just change the value, any change in value gets recorded when the auto key is on. So see, if I change this value of X and move it to this side, you see that we've got a keyframe without having to hit I on the keyboard. Now I want this spaceship to go onto that side at 90. So I'm going to bring it to 90, and I'm going to push it onto that side, and boom, we have a keyframe. Let's play this animation and see. So we have the spaceship enter, it swerves to one side, swerves back to the other side, comes to position, and then exits the frame. Wonderful. All right, now let's add some more interest to this. All right, so as it moves from frame number 30 to 60, as it's moving from this position to this position, I want the spaceship to kind of bank a bit. That would be cool. But it only starts off, and then as it reaches its position, it comes back. So for that, and now notice I changed the value. So here a keyframe has come. I don't want this keyframe, so I'm going to delete that by hitting X on the keyboard and deleting that frame. Oops, I deleted a whole bunch of frames, I think. So I'm going to undo that. The reason why everything got deleted is because all of these 3 keyframes were selected. So I'm going to click away, and then I'm just going to select the keyframes I don't want, and I'm going to hit X on the keyboard to delete those frames. All right. So now what I want is, I want the spaceship to swerve and bank. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to add some keyframes for rotation. So I'm going to bring the scroll bar to 30 exactly. And I'm also going to twirl this down. And so when we twirl this down, you can see, and I'm also going to increase the size of our timeline. So here you can see you have your X, Y, and Z locations, and all of them have keyframes. And then you have your X, Y, and Z rotation values. Now here we only have a keyframe at frame number 30. Now at keyframe number 30, all rotation values are 0. And at keyframe number 60, I want these values to be 0 because I don't want the spaceship to be, in this kind of a position here, right? So I want it to be 0. So I'm going to add a keyframe here. So I'm going to hit I on the keyboard, and so we added a keyframe. Now the reason why I hit I on the keyboard is because I didn't change the values. And remember, if you change the values, only then will auto keying create a key, right? And so now I want the spaceship to, bank. And that's why what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my scroll bar between 30 and 60, say at about 45, and I'm going to change this animation. And, I'm going to make it 25. And now you can see we have a keyframe. Perfect. Let's play this animation and see what happens. So it comes in. There you go. Yes. Perfect. So now as it comes to this position, after this position from 60 to 90, I want the spaceship to flip and go all the way. So let's go ahead to 90. Okay. And as you know, a full flip is 360 degrees. So I'm going to come in here at Y, and I'm going to change the value to 360. And there you go. We have a keyframe. And let's play this and see. Oops. So it's flipping in the wrong direction, right? Because it kind of looks odd. Can you see? We want it to flip in the opposite direction. So that's a simple fix. All we have to do is come in here and change this value to minus 360. And there you go. So I'm going to play this now. Perfect. So here we have it swerves to the side and flips. All right. Now the only thing I want to add is from this position, as it comes back into position, I want it to bank again. And so let's go ahead to 120. And, I want this position to remain the same. So since there is no change, I am going to come in here and hit I on the keyboard. So we have a keyframe. And then I'm going to bring my mouse or the scroll bar somewhere between 90 and 120. Say at about 105. Let me punch that number in. And at 105, I'm going to bank this side. All right. And let's play the animation now. There you go. So here we have a fun little animated loop, and I can hit Z on the keyboard and turn it to rendered view, and this is what our animation will look like. Perfect. Now that we have a looping background and interesting animation for our spaceship, it's finally time to render out our animation loop. So to render out our animation, let's go ahead to our properties panel, and in the properties panel, let's click on the output tab. So here is our output tab, and in the output tab, we have to scroll down, and as you scroll down here, you can see there are some options under the output title. So the first thing is, where do you want to save your rendered video? So you can click here and browse to the folder where you want to store it. So I typically store it in the folder that's named after you. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to store it here, and I'm going to name this spaceship animation accept. All right. And now the next thing is the media type is set to image. We're going to change this to video. And as soon as you do that, some options have changed. And now you want to come down here and click on encoding. And when you scroll down in the encoding, you want to change the container to MPEG 4, right? And your video codec is H.264 and the rest remains the same. Everything is perfect. Now you're ready to go ahead and render out this image, this video. All you have to do is go to render and click on render animation. Now, this might take some time on your computer depending on how fast your computer is. And if it does take a lot of time, then what you want to do is in your output, you can come here and change this value from 100% to say 50%. So this makes your, the total size of your animation half of 1920 by 1920. And you can reduce this to 25 to have an even faster animation rendering. So let's go ahead and click on render and render animation. And as soon as you do that, a new box will pop up and you can see your animation is now rendering. Once your animation is rendered, all you have to do is go to the folder where you have selected and look for the file. Here we have spaceship animation. I'm going to double click on that. And here we have our animated loop all rendered. Congratulations. And that's it, Blender Kids. You have officially reached the end of level 1 of the Blender Kids workshop. But this definitely isn't the end. It's your launchpad. So take your time to build out your own spaceship animated loop. Remember, make it yours. If you get stuck, I'm right there with you on the WhatsApp group. Don't hesitate to ask. Also, remember to render out your final animation before we meet at our catch-up session on Saturday, 2nd May. I can't wait to see what you build. I can't wait to see all your spaceship animated loops. So see you at the catch-up session.